Everybody, this is Dream, and this is going to be sort of like a video about 13 different drivers I found for the Daytona race tomorrow, the Cup race. Overall, you got to look for drivers on DraftKings Fantasy for NASCAR by looking at starting position and history at the track and stuff like that. Daytona is a little bit fickle because you can be the best car, but you can get caught up in a wreck, and then that's your day, and that can definitely happen easily at Daytona. So you do have to be kind of careful. I went through all the drivers like I do every week when I do racing, and I go through each driver and try to give a projection of where I think they're going to score. And so I've done that, and then I've taken out all the drivers I think are not going to be worth using today, and it's got me down to about 13 different drivers that you can kind of mix and match to get a lineup together. Obviously, in DraftKings, one huge advantage to DraftKings is if a driver starts, let's say they start 5th, 16th, like Ryan Blaney here. I think that's, yeah, the 16th. Let's say that he finishes first, you're actually going to get 16 bonus or 15 bonus points, which is the differential from where you start and finish. And that's a really good way to add some extra points. So if you have some good drivers that are kind of farther back in the field, utilizing them, getting that point differential if they can hang on to the end of the race, especially at Daytona, is really going to pay dividends on points. Mostly because Daytona's starting position, I mean, it is somewhat important, but it's not everything. And you're going to see in the drivers I've got some guys in the top 10, I've got some guys in the top 20, and then I got a couple guys from the back of the field. And those are just going to be, guys you're going to want to plug in and play differently depending on what you're trying to do with your lineup in order to, get the highest possible points for each individual driver that you're using. Obviously, you can only use 6 drivers, and you have a certain amount of money to utilize, so you can, you want to pay up for a couple guys, pay in the middle for some guys, and then pay, a little bit lower, like 7,000 sometimes. Uh, just depends on what kind of lineup construction. And so I've actually included 3 guys under $5,100 that I think have some potential to score some points that you could mix in. But you don't necessarily need to use those guys. We've got enough drivers that are kind of balanced in the price ranges that you can, probably make a pretty decent lineup without using one of the super low guys. However, there might be some usage there, so especially if you want to pay up for like Chase Elliott or something. So without further ado, I'm going to get into the drivers themselves and which guys I think have the most potential today. And there's not really a good particular order for this, but I'm just going to go through the drivers that I have and tell you exactly what I think about them. So the first driver, which probably isn't much of a surprise for anybody, is Chase Elliott. He's obviously the most expensive driver I have looked at today. He's actually been pretty good at Daytona in the last 5 or 6 races that he's had here. Before that, in his career, he wasn't very good, but he's really improved a lot, and obviously he's improved in his career as well. And so he has a real good, 60-point potential here. I have him in the 40 to 60 range if he can complete the race. He's kind of capped out just because he starts second place. But again, he's got he could very easily start and finish in the top 5. So he's one of the few guys in the top 10 that I think is a pretty solid option today. Obviously, he's also the most expensive driver, so you have to take that into account. But I think he's a pretty good play if you want to pay up for him. You probably have to dip into a lower price driver to keep him in the lineup. But overall, he'll probably help you pay off for that. And then for the next one is going to be Ryan Blaney. He's been a very boom or bust driver at Daytona, but when he does boom, he booms hard, and he gets in the 60-point ranges. And so we like that. There's not a ton of guys that can really even match that, consistently. And so getting a guy that can get you 60 points, and he's starting in 16th, which gives him a little bit of room for like, maybe 10 bonus points for that differential if he can get in the top 5. He gives you some opportunity there. And then my next driver is going to be Mr. Hamlin, Denny Hamlin. It's kind of surprising how consistently he's been at Daytona. In 6 of the last 8 Cup races, he's scored at least 48 fantasy points. And then if you include the Busch classes, he's actually 7 out of 9 in the last 9 races at Daytona, getting at least 48 points. That's really solid, so he seems really safe to me. He's a very really good driver for this particular race. He doesn't seem to get into too many issues at Daytona. Granted, it's not like it's impossible, but he's been pretty good here. So I kind of like him as a good, guy to start your lineup with. And he's not as expensive as some of the other guys, and he seems to have just as much or more upside. He's on my list of only 3 drivers that have a 40 to 60 range if they can complete the race, which just means they don't get involved in a wreck. Which, like I said, at Daytona, wrecks can happen a lot, so you just have to be careful. My next guy is going to be Chase Briscoe. One of the reasons I pick him is because he's starting 26, so he has some potential to do that starting spot. I have him in the 30 to 40 range, which really 40 points is probably, as a top tier for that price, is probably not ideal. But if you like Chase Briscoe, then you could do worse than him. But that's pretty much why I picked him, because he's in the outside the top 20 starting position, so he's got some movement there. And if he actually does steal a top 10 position, he could really score some points for you. But again, his price is a little bit high for what I would like based on that. But overall, it's not terrible, and so I will have him as an option for you. My next option is Austin Cindric. Now, Austin Cindric has some upside, but I will say that his starting position of 14th is a little high for what I would like based on his production. But overall, he's been pretty solid here. He's also in the 30-40 range, and he's a little bit cheaper than Chase, and probably a little bit safer, approximately. Except for, obviously if you get in a wreck or something, that's not ideal. But probably just slightly safer than Chase. I'm not really that interested in using either of these two guys just because there's better options, but he does fit into a upside situation where 30 points is a really good place that he could score if he finishes the race. So I did include him, but him and Chase Briscoe are probably in the situation where I was the least happy with their prices overall. The next guy is going to be William Byron. He has also kind of slightly been better than Austin Cindric, and he's right around the same price point, and he starts a few positions farther back. And he's been a little bit better at Daytona than Cindric, and so I had to include him. He's still kind of in the 30 to 40 range, but he's had several good races at Daytona, and so I give him as an option as well. I am still kind of feel like I want to pay a little bit less for some of these guys than what their prices are, but overall, he's probably a little bit safer than Cindric or Briscoe, and has about the same upside. My next guy, I feel like this is the steal of the draft. I have not seen any of this guy in many of the write-ups that people have been writing up, which is kind of funny to me because he's really good at Daytona for some reason, and also Talladega, which are his type of tracks. But that's Bubba Wallace. Now, he's had a terrible season. I understand that. But, you can only need one race to win, and then you feel really good about yourself. And this guy has, 60-point upside just because of his starting position being at 30th place. And so I really like that. I don't know why he's not getting much love by, NASCAR media when it comes to his ability at this particular track. And this Jordan Racing has been solid at these types of tracks, so I'm a little surprised. And he's not too expensive. He's going to cost you $700-800. He's definitely somebody that I am really wanting in my lineup, and so I have got him locked in. I think I've got him locked in all the lineups I'm making today, and he's definitely a guy that I like. Like I said, he's just been super solid, and I don't know why he's not getting the love for his statistics at Daytona specifically, or Talladega. He's got massive upside here. He actually, he's had 2 second place finishes at Daytona, and then of course he won a race at Talladega. So he's really solid. My next option is Ty Gibbs, who is in the 45, which is Kurt Busch's car. And unlike guys like Noah Gragson, who are in kind of junk cars, to get used to their career here in the Cup Series. Ty Gibbs has just got a lot of good luck or something going for him. He's in a good car, in the Jordan car. And while this is his first Cup race at Daytona, being in a decent car with a really bad with not a great starting spot, I should say, not terrible, like he's starting 23rd. He does really have some potential. I have him in the 30 to 50 range just because he's in a good car. Now, if he wasn't in a good car, I wouldn't even have him listed here. But, being in a decent car really does help. And he's teammates with Bubba Wallace, and we know that he can be successful here. So, overall, I just think he's a pretty decent option. He's definitely kind of a Hail Mary just because of his, the car he's in. And, that he just hasn't got many races at Daytona as a Cup Series driver, as in, of course, 0. But overall, he's a really solid option. The next one is Michael McDowell, and he's the only other driver that I have that's starting in the top 10. And he's starting 9th. And now, that might scare you a little bit. However, in 14 Cup races at Daytona, 12 races, he's been in the top 15. I was so shocked when I saw that. And he started in the top 10 twice, both with one of those races scoring at least 35 points. Now, it's a little bit harder to score massive points when you start, in the top 10. But with the consistency that he's had at Daytona, I feel pretty confident that as long as he finishes the race, which he's done almost all the races at the Cup level that he has, he's going to score you in that 30 to 45 range. And obviously the upside is if he wins the race, which he is capable of doing. But, obviously he probably won't win the race, but he'll still have the opportunity to be in the top 10 and give himself a chance to have a nice payday. He's somebody, like I said, I don't love his starting position to be a little bit high, but overall, I still think he's a really solid driver for this particular situation, and his consistency at Daytona is unmatched by any other driver by a mile. And then the next driver is Austin Dillon. He's actually raced at Daytona in the Cup Series 17 times, and 12 of those races he scored over 32 points. Obviously, if you don't finish the race, you don't do well. Richard Childress does a really good job with his Cup racing packages, and so they typically do better. And he does have a lower starting spot at 21, and so I definitely like him just because of that. And, he's been pretty good at Daytona as well. He has a little bit of risk because sometimes he has car failures and stuff like that, but overall, he's a solid option. Then I have 3 guys that are cheap that if you want to plug in, a Kyle Busch or Chase Elliott or Kyle Larson or somebody that you could utilize as a third option, or even if you want Chase Elliott, here like that. You probably don't even need to pay all that far down, but you could. I've got 3 guys here. So David Reagan is one of them. And you might say, well, why are you picking these guys? All right, so these last 3 guys, they are starting 34th, 33rd, and 35th. David Reagan's 34th. He has some top tier finishes at the track, but he does have a lot of DNFs. But if he can get to the end, then he has 35 to 55 point range. And that's kind of juicy considering his, just because it's Daytona where, lots of crazy things can happen. Now, as you can see actually here at the Daytona 500, he did finish 8th, and he got 65 points, and he was starting in the same position. If he can replicate that, I mean, that's a lot of points you could win a GPP with that kind of, steal of a driver. So he's probably my top of these 3 that I've found, but, there's 2 others that I'll mention here as well. Cody Ware. He has 3 starts here, and then he has 2 of those starts where he scored at least 35 fantasy points. Obviously, one of those starts has been really bad, but he's in a similar position as David Reagan. Obviously, he doesn't have quite the upside as getting a top 10 or top 5, but he could still really, if he can get to the end of the race, he could still get you 30 to 40 fantasy points. And for your lower level drivers, you can be happy about that, if you get that out of a guy. I mean, that's better than like a 7,000 point guy getting you 10 points because he crashed out. So, and then Landon Castle is my final pick here. He has actually had quite a few Cup races, and he's only ever finished outside the top 25 in 2 of them. I believe he has 10 Cup races and at Daytona, and like I said, only 2 top 25 or outside the top 25 finishes. So he's pretty safe because he's at starting at 35th position, which is only, I think there's 37 drivers in the race. So he's really in a good position to get you in a 30-40 point range, and maybe even slightly more. Just because he can get in the top 20, he could potentially get you like 15 to 20 points and just driver differential, and that can really go a long way. So if he gets, a 20th or 25th place position, you're getting 35 points at that. And if he gets like top 20, then you're even in better place. So I think he's a pretty solid option. If I had to rank Reagan, Ware, and Cassill, I would probably rate it Reagan, Cassill, and then Ware. But you could just mix and match those guys, especially if you want to pay up for a lot of expensive guys. And as you can see, I've been kind of like putting the lineup a little bit together, what I like. And ironically, it just fits perfectly to put Ty Gibbs in there. So this is going to be one of my lineups. It's just going to show you that in the video. So that's kind of cool. If you want to use it, feel free. But I would recommend, mixing and matching some players, or drivers, excuse me, in order to, make it a little bit better, maybe. But overall, I feel like a lot of these drivers are really good. All the drivers I mentioned, I think, have a really solid potential. I will put a recap in the description below after the race is over to tell you how those particular drivers did. And if you like this video, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and have a nice day, guys.